Namaskar and thank you for joining us here on the Economic Brief, the show that looks at key stories from the worlds of business, finance and economy and contextualizes them from an Indian and a global perspective. On the program, the list of the richest Indians is growing, as is their net worth, reaching $905 billion US. India has 185 billionaires and counting, says the UBS report. India gears up for an expected tariff war. China gears up for an expected tariff war with the US. The Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz feels that China has a bigger market and more engineers. The US health insurance industry is looking inward after the murder of the CEO of United Health. It sends shockwaves through the trillion-dollar industry. Well, the new RBI governor, Sanjay Malhotra, highlighted the broad aims of the Reserve Bank of India after taking office on the 11th of December. Let's listen to what he said.
The RBI in its 90th year has given to itself the theme of stability, trust and growth. So all these three broad themes that have been chosen, very, very pertinent, as is still an economy which needs to develop as we are entering in this Amrit Kaal, and to realize the vision of the Viksit Bharat.
Okay, let's begin by taking a look at this UBS report on Indian billionaires, on billionaires across the world, in fact. And let's see how India is doing. Coming up on the screen right now, as we can see, we have to see that the Indian billionaires, their net worth has sort of skyrocketed. It's $905 billion worth, the net worth of the collective net worth of all Indian billionaires. And that has gone up by 263%, collective wealth in the last 10 years, that is. In fact, it's gone up by about 42% in the last year itself. And the number of billionaires has doubled also. We can see that it's gone up from 153 to 185 in 1 year, but it has more than doubled in the last 10 years. And their wealth has more than tripled. In fact, we've seen a 123% rise in the number of billionaires in the last 10 years. So that's kind of pretty cool. We can see that Indian family businesses actually are doing reasonably well because much like the South Koreans, they have that Chobel system. And that helped the South Korean economy actually emerge and become a developed economy. India's economy seems to be following in the same right. Now we're looking at the number of billionaires of different countries. We can see that the US, of course, continues to be right at the top with 835 billionaires. And they saw a growth of 11.2%. China is seeing a decline, 17.9% decline in the number of their billionaires. India has seen a 20.9% rise from 153 to 185. Germany has 117 billionaires, a rise of 7.3%. And Switzerland has 85 billionaires, a rise of 13.3%. So India really doing quite well. And we can see that there is a driving force in terms of entrepreneurship in our country. While tech billionaires are doing well across the world, we can see that Indian billionaires are far more diversified. Pharmaceuticals, edtech, fintech, food delivery. As I mentioned earlier, the family businesses are doing well and they are listed. Those listed ones publicly are ones which are causing this kind of rise in their net worth. And we can see also that the NSE Nifty 500 has more than doubled in the last 10 years. So that is, in a nutshell, we can put that into context and see that the Indian billionaires are certainly doing a wonderful job. Let's listen to Ananta Nageshwaran now, who is the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. And he said clearly that India's digital public infrastructure has not yet achieved its true potential. Let's listen to what he said.
The digital public infrastructure is something that we have done very well, but its potential is still untapped. It is not just a means to improve financial access, although that is a very important component of DPI, but it is also a repository of data. We need to make sure that the digital public infrastructure and the data they generate are put to use for public welfare purposes without compromising privacy and security, etc.
And we're joined in the studio by Prasenjit Basu, well-known economist. He tracks global affairs and also, stock markets, the growth of the economy. This is a subject that he's been tracking as well. Thanks very much, Mr. Basu, for being with us. So how do you view, the growth of billionaires? Is it actually a reward for entrepreneurship?
Absolutely. I mean, almost all the billionaires in India are self-made people, men and women who basically have invested their personal savings and grown businesses from the ground up. So they're all, almost all of them, startup billionaires. And I think this is reflective of the dynamism of the Indian economy, the dynamism of entrepreneurship in India. And of course, entrepreneurs typically create thousands of jobs as they grow, as their billions grow in terms of wealth. They deploy a lot of that in new businesses, and when they are at a certain stage of satisfaction or satiation, they then begin to basically donate towards social causes. And you see that with a number of Indian billionaires having
let's go back a little bit and see whether do they have a kind of, a special kind of ecosystem that's required for billionaires? And, what kind of support do they expect from government? And you see that actually happening here in our country.
Well, Prime Minister Modi has made Startup India one of his themes. Right from his first Independence Day speech, he talked about Make in India and Startup India. No previous Prime Minister has focused on startups as a major theme and goal. So creating the right atmosphere for entrepreneurship to develop and grow is a very new thing in Indian, modern Indian culture. But it's not new when we think about ancient India. In ancient India, the Raja was told, if you go back all the way to Kautilya, you don't take more than 1/6 in terms of taxes. You create an environment where entrepreneurship can flourish, and that helps the society to develop as well. And so this, in some ways, is going back to the beginnings of Indian culture.
And do you think that this economic system also helps the billionaires to put, you were talking about them putting money back, but investing them back to see that this growth takes place? And what kind, do you see that, India already is the third largest number of entrepreneurs in the world. Is this an indicator of India's growth potential to bring in more FDI?
Well, FDI is another way of growing. So you quite rightly referred to South Korea as an example of the sort of way in which India is, the path that India is emulating. Korea, Japan, and Taiwan basically have been self-driven economies. FDI is more the Chinese way. China and Southeast Asia basically drove their economies, their export sectors, through foreign direct investment, encouraging foreign multinationals to invest in the export sectors and grow them. In India's case, we followed, I think, much more the Japan, Korea, Taiwan model of encouraging our own entrepreneurs, creating a startup ecosystem that enables them to grow. And I think, in fact, we've done a lot better even than Korea and Taiwan. I mean, particularly Korea and Japan,
larger in
where
scale.
they had very large conglomerates.
Right.
The Keiretsus in Japan, the chaebols in Korea, much more like Taiwan, where entrepreneurship has been the key factor in driving Taiwan's economy. India, in many ways, is following that model increasingly, and it is paying enormous dividends for our people. I mean, increasingly, jobs will be generated by the billionaires as they invest in newer areas. I think the one remaining sort of lacuna, in my view, is labor-intensive manufacturing. Okay. That is where we really need to see new investment and new entrepreneurs emerge, and especially with the demise of Bangladesh as a garment manufacturer over time, I think there's a huge opportunity for Indian entrepreneurs to get into that area.
Mr. Basu, would you remain with us for our next story as well? We are going to talk about China and U.S. tariffs. China is preparing for a tariff war with the United States of America. The world's two largest economies are targeting concerns of protectionism, but both are heavily invested in globalization already. Their concerns for market access into each other's economies as well as the rest of the world can only lead to a tariff war. Now, the incoming Trump administration has already sent out a signal that it will be implementing tariffs as high as 60% on Chinese goods. This report puts things into context. China has taken several steps to boost its economy and prepare for a potential trade war with the incoming Trump administration. China has adopted a moderately loose monetary policy, a stance not seen since the global financial crisis of 2008-2009. This includes measures to expand domestic demand and stabilize property and stock markets.
The number of new discriminatory trade and investment measures in the world has increased by more than 5,600 per year, far exceeding the pre-pandemic average. The trend of deglobalization is getting worse and worse.
The National People's Congress Standing Committee, NPCSC, unveiled a debt swap program to relieve local governments' immediate debt repayment pressures. The central bank announced its biggest stimulus package since the coronavirus pandemic. In the US, President-elect Donald Trump has announced plans to impose significant tariffs on China. He has threatened to implement tariffs as high as 60% on Chinese goods.
China's position of opposing the unilateral imposition of tariffs is consistent. Imposing tariffs at will on trading partners will not solve the United States' own problems.
China is considering various strategies to counter potential US tariffs, including targeting US firms and diversifying trade partnerships with countries like India and Africa. Some eminent economists believe China has an advantage in this potential trade war.
It has more engineers. It has a bigger market domestically, and also the chips that you put in manufactured goods that you export around the world.
Tensions have been soaring in the Taiwan Strait as China's largest maritime deployment in decades stirs unease. This too is directed at the US.
In accordance with relevant provisions of the anti-foreign sanctions law, China has decided to take countermeasures against US military-industrial enterprises and senior executives.
These measures reflect China's apparent proactive approach to navigating economic challenges and preparing for potential trade conflicts. The two countries met at summit level in Lima on the sidelines of the APEC summit in November.
If we treat each other as opponents or enemies, engage in vicious competition and mutual harm, China-US relations will suffer setback or even regressions.
The outgoing US president making it clear that the two countries don't see eye to eye, but at least don't indulge in double-speak.
We haven't always agreed, but our conversations have always been candid and always been frank.
President-elect Donald Trump has announced plans to impose significant tariffs on China. Trump has emphasized that these measures are part of his strategy to protect American jobs and industries. The Economic Brief, DD India. Right, and joining us also on Zoom link is Professor Abhijit Das. He's an expert on international trade. Thank you very much, Professor Das, for being with us. And Mr. Basu continues to be with us in the studio. Professor Das, how serious, is this potential tariff war? And who has the advantage?
Oh, it certainly is a very, very dangerous situation that we are likely to be confronted with. US raises tariffs against China. China is likely to retaliate by imposing tariffs against US. This is likely to result in considerable disruption of global trade. No one gains from the tariff war. Both the countries will eventually lose. But the biggest casualty in the tariff war will be the respect for rules under the World Trade Organization. The tariff war will really amount to both the countries, that is US and China, thumbing their nose at the World Trade Organization rules. And that does not bode well for India, that does not bode well for China, that does not bode well for US either. But let's also bear in mind that President-elect Trump's threat to impose tariffs of about 60% on China may be a negotiating ploy to get China onto the negotiating table and to extract concessions.
Okay.
If that is the game plan, then maybe we could see temperatures coming down a bit and maybe sanctity being restored sooner rather than later.
Right. But Mr. Basu, what do you think? I mean, do you think that India stands to benefit in some way? Do you see the India-US partnership on critical and emerging technology, ISET, getting a boost under Trump, or would he be wanting also to direct, manufacturing of those high-tech commodities back to the US?
No, I think the India-US technology relationship will gather momentum under Trump. But, just to go back to your previous question,
sure.
It's also important to understand that China imposes more than 5,000 non-tariff barriers. So China is not a free trader by any means. The idea that China is somehow this paragon of free trade virtue is complete nonsense. It is a mercantilist economy. It provides massive subsidies to its export sectors. It provides almost unlimited credit to sectors that it wants to back. And then it imposes non-tariff barriers to imports into the country. And so, for instance, if you look at India's exports to China, they haven't been growing very much. I mean, India's exports to the rest of the world have been growing rapidly ever since the pandemic. But to China, they continue to be almost stagnant. Whereas China's imports into India are continuing to grow very rapidly. This is the sort of imbalance that Trump is seeking to address. And I think he, even in his first term, he imposed tariffs on only 50% of Chinese imports into the US.
Okay.
And the tariffs are pretty moderate, but they had a huge impact. China's share of US imports was 21.8% in 2018. Now they're down now to 13%, and they're going to continue to decline. And that basically creates an opportunity for others to fill the breach left by China. At the moment, in order, it is Mexico, Vietnam, and India that are the major beneficiaries.
Okay.
And I think that as the technology relationship with India grows, India will, I think, be a much bigger beneficiary going forward,
sure.
Including with, for instance, Apple's ecosystem increasingly moving to India through Foxconn.
Professor Das, how does the tariff war, the potential tariff war, affect India? And should India take some preemptive steps?
The potential tariff war, when it gets really actualized on the ground, could impact India in multiple ways. With the US market for Chinese goods closing down, there is a high risk of China dumping some of those products into the Indian market. So we really stand at the risk of facing cheap dumped imports coming into India and further injuring our domestic producers. So our domestic producers have to be cognizant of this reality, of this likely eventuality. There could be opportunities for Indian exporters, but to my mind, that opportunity or the possibility of those opportunities are more optimistic than what really happened in the first round of trade war during President Trump's first regime. The real beneficiaries were countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Mexico, etc. And India really did not manage to make much headway, could not tap into those opportunities. And the reason is not very far to seek. We are really not price competitive in a large number of products. Till we improve our price competitiveness, these opportunities will remain mere potentials, and it would be very difficult for Indian exporters to make any meaningful gains in the US market on account of China vacating that space.
Professor Das, thanks very much for joining us in this discussion. Mr. Basu, I'd ask you to stay on because I want your views also on our next story, which is about the US healthcare system. Now, tragedy has struck in New York as the CEO of the United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, became the victim of a targeted killing in Midtown Manhattan. The shocking crime has not only rattled the nation, but also sparked a storm of outrage online, with Americans venting their frustration at the trillion-dollar health insurance industry over denied medical claims. Diptanshu Kashyap brings us more.
With the tragic murder of United Healthcare's Chief Executive Officer, Brian Thompson, the spotlight is on the deep frustration of the American public with the health insurance industry. The debate is centered on the systemic failures in healthcare, with many patients sharing their harrowing experiences. Recent reports reveal a grim reality. Claims are denied more often, premiums and medical visit costs are soaring, and patients are left grappling with surprise charges for treatments they thought were covered.
There's a lot of inspiration and frankly, motivation out there to have a better system in place, and I think we're seeing the signs of that. It's also true that that should not have happened. And so there cannot be this false moral equivalence in our public discourse.
Public discontent has been building for years, fueled by what many see as opaque practices by insurers. Protesters have accused insurance companies of using tactics like prior authorization to delay or outright deny essential treatments. Critics argue these strategies not only jeopardize patients' health, but also deepen mistrust in the system. Rising healthcare costs are attributed partly to the consolidation of doctors' practices, hospitals, and insurers. Insurance companies often tout their ability to negotiate lower prices for services and medications, but patients claim the savings really translate into reduced expenses for them. According to surveys by KFF for the year 2023-2024, 53% of adults struggle to afford healthcare costs, with the burden disproportionately impacting uninsured, Black and Hispanic adults and lower income groups. 61% of uninsured adults admit to skipping or delaying necessary care due to financial constraints. 75% of adults worry about their ability to pay unexpected medical bills or cope with rising healthcare costs. The murder has not only underscored the vulnerability of corporate leaders, but also reignited the debate over the urgent need for healthcare reform. With costs spiraling, claims increasingly denied, and public frustration mounting, the industry faces mounting pressure for a patient-centered overhaul. For millions of Americans, the hope for a more transparent, affordable, and accessible healthcare system remains a pressing priority. Diptanshu Kashyap's report for the Economic Brief for DD India.
Well, Mr. Basu is still with us. Mr. Prasanjit Basu, I mean, how would you look at this story? There is false moral equivalence, clearly. I mean, nobody can be killed for this kind of a situation. But clearly, the insurance companies need to look inward. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. I think the health insurance companies need to introspect. And it's quite interesting that the alleged murderer was class valedictorian in one of the most eminent schools in the Philadelphia area. I went to the same university as he did. So I'm a little embarrassed by his involvement. But the point is that he was a brilliant student, and he had a very clear manifesto of why he was doing this. And there is a great deal of sympathy for his action, although there's nobody's condoning murder, cold-blooded murder in particular. But the agenda of reforming the health insurance sector is a key one. Interestingly, it wasn't part of the political debates in this year's election.
Sure.
Which basically means that Obamacare, the American Care Act, has now become well established.
Right.
And cutting pharmaceutical costs is the agenda even for Trump.
Okay.
So I think there will be a lot of action on
Right.
the healthcare front.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Prasenjit Basu. Thank you for joining us in the studio today and throwing light on a lot of our stories. Well, that's all we have in the Economic Brief. Thanks very much for watching, and we leave you with this story on how much of a money spinner India's wedding season is. Anu Kaushik reports. Namaskar.
Season in India, where the event is an elaborate affair lasting several days and involving various rituals. Naturally, a lot of effort and money are spent on the gala. In 2024, India's wedding season is set to reach new milestones with an estimated 4.8 million weddings between October and December, driving businesses worth 6 trillion rupees. The wedding industry is a multi-billion-dollar sector covering everything from event planning, catering to jewelry.
Wedding season majorly starts from August and goes till March. The peak season is in November and December. Starting range is 20,000. The colors of the season are majorly green and peach pink.
According to a survey by wedding planning platform WedMeGood, the current average wedding budget in India is 36.5 lakh Indian rupees, while the average budget for destination wedding is over 51 lakh. From their clothes to decorations, brides and grooms go the extra mile to ensure that everything is perfect on their special day.
So we just came here to shop around to look what all variety I can see for my wedding in February.
This also means a lot of spending on weddings. According to the survey, in the 2024 wedding season, 82% of people use personal or family savings to fund the events, while 12% took loans either from banks or friends, and 6% went for asset liquidation. So, how much is being spent on weddings? According to the survey, 40.3% people spent less than 15 lakh, while 18.5% spent somewhere between 15 to 25 lakh. Over 22% spent between 20 to 50 lakh, while 8.6% spent between 50 lakh to 1 crore. 9% people spent more than 1 crore. Often set against exotic backdrops, celebrity weddings have popularized the idea of opulent events marked by clothing themes and elaborate menus. New trends are also influencing people, with couples going for eco-friendly decor and lab-grown diamonds. India's wedding market ranks second globally after the United States. In the country, weddings aren't just a celebration of a union, but they are also a major economic phenomenon, boosting sectors like fashion, tourism, and hospitality. They also reflect India's rich culture and diversity. With camera person Mohit, this is Anu Kaushik reporting for the Economic Brief, DD India.